Alright. In continuing to get ready for my buddy to be driving this car every day, I got all the wheels pulled off, and I went through and greased up with the PV blaster the mounting bolts for the calipers and the bleeder screws on all four corners. Also, whew, fellers, the lug nuts on this thing. Nobody's ever greased them with the anti-seize in this car's life, I can tell. Taking every one of these lug nuts off was a breaker bar and you know what I mean, back and forth. Oh, it was terrible. Excuse me, puppies. Let me tell you something that if you're watching one of my videos, you probably already know. Anti-seize, fellers. I'm gonna put some of that stuff all over these rusty seized up lug nuts. Put the old lug nut on and run it in and out a time or two before I put the wheels back on. And then when we go to mount our wheels back up after we got the new brake pads on, the lug nuts will just go right in, and we can even use a torque wrench and have a hint of an idea of how tight our foot poundage is. See, with them being all it takes so much tension to get the lug nut run down. You're already over tightening the guy. You're over tightening your stud before the nut ever contacts the wheel. You have no idea if your stuff's tight enough. And it's a super big deal over tightening those lug nuts. You will break those. It's the 80, 100 foot-pounds, whatever the manufacturer recommends. That's not just a you know, if you want to, or tighter is better. Tighter is not better. You'll be over tightened all your guys, roll down the road and hit a pothole, and then a bunch of your lug studs will just crack from all the extra tension that they're under, and then your wheel comes off. It's not a good time. Anti-seize, fellers. Anti-seize. I got one good thing going for us. While I'm down here with no caliper clamping on things, I grabbed the lug studs and moved them all around, up and down and left and right, and we don't appear to have any play in any direction, so it looks like our wheel bearing's in good shape up here. That's always good. And I noticed here on my my new brake pads, we got a wear indicator guy to make the scraping noise, and the other pad doesn't have one. And I see these pads have the wear scraping on both pads. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the other side has no wear scrapies on it. That's what new brake pads look like. A little bit more life in those. And before I put the new pads on, I took these slide clips off. If you just lift up on the tab, they pop right out, top and bottom. Cleaned them up and put some grease down here where the edges of the brake pads slide back and forth. And yeah, now we're ready to put the caliper back on and hope that it doesn't get all sticky on us later. And do that trace more time quick. At least she's you know, disc and caliper style in the back. That's kind of neat. And one more thing on the brake pad job. Put the caliper back on. These guys torque down to 80 foot-pounds, and then if you happen to take the big mounting bracket off, it was 120 foot-pounds to put him back on. And yeah. Maybe it'll run better now that we gave her some nice brakes. Probably not. Alright. Now we're done with both of the front brakes, and I was right. No scrapies on the driver's side, both the scrapies on the passenger side. After everything else I found in this car, I'm not surprised. So yeah, now we got front breakages. They were missing a lug nut here. That was a nightmare because it hadn't had one on it in a long time, and the stud fell out, so I drove it back through and kept working it back and forth, and now we can put all 5 lug nuts on the front wheel. That's always good. Back here, however, similar situation to the front, but it's not. We got 9/16 14mm bolts holding that guy on. The only issue we have here is that is a screw type caliper. See how it has the slotties? That means I gotta go to the store and get me a little Rubik's Cube guy for twisting that guy back in. I think you turn it to the right and it goes back in. And then we can do the rear breakages. Here's that little Rubik's Cube tool I was telling you about before. He's got like 6 different options of the different style doohickeys to fit into the guy. Now I've got the wheel back on this side. We can finally come over and do the last quarter of the breakage job. And we'll put her all back on the wheels again. Hey. Alright. Now, moving on. Now that we sorted all those other things we just did, we're moving into the steering department. Now that she starts and runs and drives and stops really well, we're going to take care of the half a mile of steering play that she's got. And we've also got new booty boots for the old steering rack down here. On account of, if I can get you at the right angle, yeah, she's torn. You shouldn't be able to get inside your boot. So we're going to replace those on both sides, which is a pretty simple ordeal. Clean this shaft up really good. We're going to have to mark our positions on our tie rod to the nut to the arm there. Try to keep her in the same alignment situation she was. And luckily for us, I've dug in here and under the dash. And as it turns out, all my steering play is not in that expensive rack. The rack seems to be in great shape. When I got in here and removed all these boots, I was able to see that the steering shaft just goes all over the place and bounces around and has all sorts of play. But when I look at the input on the gearbox, it hardly turns any at all before the steering knuckles actually start to steer. So that's really good for our steering rack. Not so good for our steering shaft. We're gonna order a new one of these. They're like $100 online and at the part stores. And that is this U-joint, the coupler here where he hooks into the steering shaft in the car, and this piece, the little slippy guy, and that other U-joint right there. It has a collar that slides onto the gearbox, or gearbox steering rack. Everything else I have has a gearbox. And to get these boots off, this was quite a pain. You have to slide. This one is like on the inside of the car. This guy goes down over the top of the steering rack and sticks into this guy. So you have to take this boot, hold it down, remove the bolt up here, holding this guy onto that guy, and then you can slide him down, and that'll make it where you can pull this boot off after you come in here. There's 1, 2, and a third one down here under the carpet. Little Phillips head screws, probably like a 5/16 head on those screws. And when you get that loose, you can pull this guy off. He'll slide off of there, and then you can get in there, and this guy will also slide up out of there. And then your whole steering shaft is completely exposed. Now to replace this guy, we have one more nut on the coupler at the other end, and it all comes out as one piece. And you could probably almost do that from inside the car. You've got a little bit of room to work with over here. You can get down there to it. And down here, you can get all up in there and get to that bolt that way. But right now, while I've got my new steering shaft on order, we're gonna go ahead and clean these up and replace the boots on the rack. All right, Now I've got the shaft all cleaned off with some brake clean, wiped that all down. I got my tie rod in, marked across the nut and on the shaft here so I can see where I ended at before. I don't want to go further in or out because that'll change our alignment. And I got my nut loose down here. I cleaned that off with a wire brush first to give me better chances of getting it loose without spinning the ball in the socket. That always sucks. But that guy came down, it was a 17 millimeter, and now I'll take a hammer and pop up on it, get this to come up out of that socket, and then I should be able to grab here with a crescent wrench and spin it off. This shaft here will also spin back and forth that way, so you have a spot to hold on to it with a 1/2 inch wrench, but I didn't actually have to do that. I just grabbed the locking nut and the tie rod in, and when I broke those loose from each other, this thing spins off nice and easy now. Now I'll get that and the nut the rest of the way off, and we have a clip here, and then this half of our boot can come off, and then I'd imagine there's a clip on the other side down there. All right, I was able to get the rest of the boot off. Turns out she was a 3-piece model at this point. It does have another clamp at this end, and it's much harder to deal with. The one at this end was the little compression guy you can get on with the needle nose. But at the other side though, it was one of these stupid one-time crimpy guys where it goes together and then there's a little tool that squeezes it down. I was able to get underneath there with these snippy doodles right through here. I laid on my stomach here, and then I could get those pliers up through this hole and just barely get at that little notch in the guy was over here on this side. I was just barely able to get the tip of those cutters in there and then snip that off, and when that snipped loose it released the tension. Then I could just take this and wiggle it back and forth and it slid right off. Now it's almost time to go on with our new boot, but before we do that, oh yeah, also if I didn't mention just now, right here, see that little hole? The old one had the same thing, and under here there's a tube right there that gets exposed now. That hooks into that guy for some reason that I don't know about, but anyway, make sure you put him back where he goes. Now before I put this new boot on, I'm gonna put new grease all in here and stuff a glob of new grease all there where the rack moves back and forth against the pinion. All right, well, that looks a lot better. I've got a zip tie on the inside, and I had a hose clamp out here that would fit instead of doing zip ties at both ends. Definitely be better to do a hose clamp at the other end, but this isn't something that like spins and sees a whole lot of action. She just slowly moves in and out while you turn. Getting that end of the bellows slipped over the end of the rack and into that little pipe at the same time was quite a pain. It's really difficult because this thing just squishes and moves all over, and it's hard to squeeze it the right way to get her to pop onto that lip without coming out of the little tube hole there. I'm pretty sure that tube is to keep the pressure balanced between this bellows and the one on the other side, so when this guy accordion fold compresses, the air goes into the other side that's expanding and vice versa, probably to keep from an air bubble popping them open. But yeah, now she's all back together there, and we can put her all back together here and then go do the same on the other side. All right, now we got that guy put back down. I ran my nut back up right until it hit the edge of my green marks, and then I ran it another thread or two that way. I brought this guy up to it and then snugged the nut down, and then when I turned the nut down, it brought her back right where I wanted to be. Could still stand to get in alignment, but we're pretty confident we're right where we once were. And I tightened this guy down. It said 22 foot-pounds, but it seemed like I went a little tighter than that. I tightened it up till she drew all the way back down into her spot, and then I brought it tighter, and then the hole was a little off, so I tightened it up a little more and got the cotter pin through. Now we can go through and grease all our little zert fittings before we put the wheel back on over here. And do it all once more. Alright, it's better now. New booties and no dirt in our rack. Nobody likes a dirty rack. Now, we're all wrapped up in the steering department until our shaft comes in. The next things we'll be messing with on this car are the stupid power windows. And I'm selling this car to my buddy really cheap, so we're not gonna try to fix the back windows. We're just gonna take the panels off, maybe cut a piece of wood, do something to keep them propped up so they don't fall down, get my new tools out, and try to make it where he's got front windage. Because that's important for the drive-throughs and when your AC eventually wears out. Yeah. Today we got her back out here in the yard. And we're just really getting dug into our power window situation. On the bright side, I did find out the passenger front and the driver left rear, that one right there, those two already go up and down. So I've went inside of both of those, took the panels off, got them down to like here, and I put some grease on these tracks. This is one of them. See, there's a guy that goes up and down on here, and he clips on right there and slides up and down on that track. And on these cars, I appreciate this. A lot of our Ford stuff I've noticed has one track, and you often have a problem with the window rocking. This thing's got a really complicated cable setup. She just X patterns everywhere, and you may not be able to tell over here, but there's another track that rides on that motor up here. So she's got the dual stabilizations. There's a guy holding the window, and back here is a guy holding the window. And when I got into this door panel, my first thought was, oh my god, everything's missing. Because I can see they took bolts out up here and over here. I just removed this one and this one to get a better look at what's going on with our regulator. In this window, it looks like the regulator is all together and operational. And my only issue seems to be electronicals. Before I walk you through that, I'll tell you about the other window over here. This door over here, yeah, this one's broken, and it's gonna stay broken. I got a board in here propping her up so she don't fall down. I think I'm going to unplug the motor too, because the motor works and the regulator would work. It's kind of the dumbest thing. The cable's even solid and everything. Not that, yeah, you can't see the track in here anyway. She's right there. But the cable is solid up and down. The issue with this guy is one cable, the sheathed part of the cable goes down to the bottom of the guy down here. It hooks in and that part stays there, and then the cable pulls up and down across a little bend, like piece of plastic elbow. It's supposed to be the same thing on the top side. That track comes up, it ends up here, and the end of that cable, the sheathed part, comes up, and there's a plastic guy on the end of it that hangs on that top of the track, and then the cable spools out of that sheathing, goes straight up and down. The plastic guy that hooks to the top is broken off. So now we're going to come in here and unplug it, make sure it doesn't, you know, move around while my buddy's using the car. He doesn't have to worry about accidentally hitting the switch, even though I don't think it would do anything because the cable's not hooked down low. It can't actually pull on the window. Just might as well not have it doing the things since it can't do them anyway. And then what's nice is if he ever wants to get a regulator, we could pop that in here and make the window go up and down. But right now, you know, she's a back window and it's not that necessary. Moving back to this window situation, now that I've got the other three sorted, we only have the most important window. You can't get your takeout food if it doesn't go down. So now that I've seen that the regulator's all whole, and it looks like if this thing had power to go up, it would go up, because she's stuck in the all the way bottom retracted position. So I believe all I need to do is make it where this thing gets power to go up and find some bolts to reattach her everywhere. Now I've come over here with my probing tool, and I discovered that with the motor unplugged, I can probe into here. When I click down on the driver's window switch, I get 12 volts here. It actually like climbs to 12 volts. If you hold it down all the way, it'll stay there until you click up. But when I click up on the switch, I get like half a volt here. So something's wrong there. And then I even went, like, see, these two wires are this window. The one's right down here, the window right behind us. That one works, and I probed the switch here. Also, I probed the switch on this side, and I had the same thing. 12 volts down, half a volt up. But when I probed the other guy down here, it gets 12 volt down, 12 volt up. So that tells me the switch for the driver's window is going to be the reason this stuff doesn't work. So hopefully, maybe I can get in here, take this thing apart, clean that switch up, and then find new bolts and stuff for all of this. I don't know why they left the bolts out up here. Seems... Anyway. Alright. I worked a screwdriver in on both sides of this casing and very carefully pulled this guy out. And then, same thing with this feller. This is the back side, what you'd normally see here where the connectors go into. I worked around this slowly, painstakingly with a few screwdrivers. And then that little cap slid right out. Now here's the back side of our switch. I know nothing about what any of that means. And over here on the front, I just practiced with this one switch and figured out you can pop these little switchy doodles off, and then that board will come out, and maybe, hopefully, we can clean our driver's window up connection and put it all back together, and it'll just be wonderful. Well, here's what it looks like underneath that. That guy distributes the light around to the switches. Apparently they light up. That's kind of neat. I can tell anyway, that little button there is the automatic window down. So that's window down, and a little further, boop, 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 automatic windows all the way down. Now we just have to try to get in here and figure out why the upside doesn't put out the 12 volts. That should be easy, right? No, probably not. Alright, so I just, can't see, got in here and very gently pried apart on this 20-year-old plastic. And then our little guy, he popped out. So there's a little spring in there keeping tension against these guys. What pushed down against those guys. So in the middle, There's no power going nowhere, and when you move that way, let's see, that must be down. Yeah, when you move that way, that's down, and then when they touch up that way, that's up. So I'm hoping maybe we can clean these little contacts here and clean down in there with some connector cleaner, and I don't know, a Q-tip probably won't even fit in there. Anyway, we'll try to clean those points, and maybe we'll have driver window uppage. Actually, I just discovered something. I was thinking these guys like made connection. They don't. What that thing is doing is, where's my pointer? What that thing is doing is pushing down on these guys. So in the middle, he's not pushing on nothing. And then when you push it towards the up direction, he touches this way. Yeah, you can see him rock. And those are the connections we're going to need to clean. From this little doohickey to where he touches. I might be able to do that without prying this apart further, because we're just pushing our luck, you know what I mean? Okay. Now I've stuck her back together enough to test on it, and I got my little gauge over there. Let's see, that's number 1, and that should be down. Yep, that one works. What about the up? Oh, shoot. I can still put all this back together and sort the whole window thing, and then we just got to get a replacement master switchy doodle to actually have windowage. Yeah, so that's good. Alright, now we got her back in the shop, and I was cleaning on all the windows really nice. Yeah, you can kind of tell. You can see through real good. And while I was cleaning the windows, I reminded myself about this mess. Where somebody used like roofing tape to tape this plastic back down for some reason. Yeah. And in taking that off to get this mess cleaned up, I found we have a cabin air filter. So that's neat. We'll probably be replacing on that guy. That seems like a really dumb place for a cabin air filter, doesn't it? Doesn't all the water that runs down here hit this guy and then drain all down here? Isn't this filter in like a gutter-way for the water? Yeah, that's kind of dumb. I guess that must be why they were concerned about their plastic lid being like stuck up over here. They must have been getting rainwater onto the filter and then probably blowing into the car. Well, that's nice. Might have to address that. Whew. What a mess they made with that tape. I've got almost all of it off the glass, so that's a lot better. And I cleaned up in here and blew out that filter till we go get another one. And this guy, though, cleaning that mess off of this plastic has been a mess. Ew, I've even resorted to high grit sandpaper. Or low grit, yeah, 80. Man, what a mess. I hit it with the window spray first, and then got on it with that, what are you, razor blade. That took a lot of it off, and then I hit it with the Goo Gone and scrubbed it a whole bunch, and that just turned it into an oil. And now I've got dish soap sitting on it. So yeah. The worst part is this guy over here is a rubber lip, and it's really hard to get that gunk off of the rubber. I really love it for when you're, when my buddy's enjoying his car and he goes to wash it, he can clean his windshield without taking all that goo and bringing it onto the windshield. Yeah, that would be good. And then from there, after I finally get that clean, we'll figure out how to make a proper seal up here. It looks like, if nothing else, I could tie into this metal down here and get her to sandwich down better instead of running some stupid roofing tape across the whole thing. Alright, couple hours of painstaking goo removal later. That looks better. I had to add some screws to the situation because the previous owner had our panel here warped up. I figured out what had happened and what they did. See, right here, there's a little clip that looks like that, down 90-degree angle, and it hooks under the lip of that windshield. The previous owner went in the wrong way, and they must have hooked down here and then pushed down, and they took the little clip and they folded him over. So that made it where when the clip was down in front of the windshield, it had this piece too far out because it's thicker now from the thing being folded over, and that made it where they couldn't line up their hole here. So they just had the folded over clip sitting on top of the edge of the windshield, having this picked up all high, and then they ran the tape on it, and then that being stretched like that trained this piece of plastic to be all bulgy and bulgy. So when I straightened the clip out and got her hooked back under, we still had a spot here and over here where water could have ran under. So I just added a screw or two. Maybe we'll hit them with the, what's that thing called? The black Sharpie. But now you got 2 more screws to pull out when you remove this panel, but that should keep that seal pushed down all against the windshield where the water can come run over it instead of pouring on top of your cabin filter. Yeah, so there you go. One more thing fixed. That about brings us to a good stopping point here in this video. We're reaching the 30-minute mark. The old Pontiac's out there. I'm just getting y'all an outro in here real quick on account of the way that I record things. I just fix and fix and fix and record, and I never think about where to break the videos up. So I edit the videos together, and then it gets late at night, and then I run out here to the shop and I'm like, throw in the middle part, the outro, and then sometimes I record the intro for the next one. Anyway, that's a Buick Regal. That's going to be in one of our next video series. Yep, this is going to be one of the future project series. Real similar to the Pontiac, but different on account of this one had a hole in the piston. Other than that, though, low miles, grandpa owned, never been beat on, probably not. Anyway, back to the Pontiac. That about wraps it up for this video there. In the next one, I'm pointing this way like you can even see the car. Yeah, she's out there. Ooh, yeah, good timing. How you doing? In our next Pontiac video, we'll be digging in a little further and fixing a couple more things and hopefully getting really close to wrapping it up and getting my buddy ready to drive. But thank y'all for watching. Thank you so much if you made it this far through my long-winded videos. Y'all have a good one, and we'll be seeing you. Well, I guess y'all will be seeing us. You know what I mean. I mean, I don't, but you probably do.